It all started with a car, not a fancy one, just a reliable used sedan that I needed to get to a new job I was actually proud of. I had saved up a decent down payment, my record was clean, and I had never been in debt a day in my life, or so I thought. I filled out the loan application with the kind of naive confidence only someone who has played by all the rules can have. The rejection email arrived 2 days later. It was polite, corporate, and completely devastating. The reason cited was vague, something about excessive outstanding obligations, and a debt-to-income ratio that was astronomically high. I genuinely believed it was a system error. I called the bank, my voice calm and steady, explaining that there must have been a mix-up. I was 24 years old, lived a quiet life, and my only real expense was the modest rent I paid my parents. The loan officer on the other end was patient but firm, suggesting I pull my full credit report. He said the numbers weren't just high. They were the kind of figures that belonged to someone with multiple mortgages or a failed business. I remember laughing nervously, telling him that was impossible. The silence on his end was the first real sign that my world was about to collapse. The process of getting my report online felt surreal. I had to answer security questions that I barely remembered setting up. What was the make of your first car? I had never owned a car, which was the entire reason I was in this mess. I clicked through the verification steps, a cold knot tightening in my stomach with each passing moment. The loading screen with the little spinning circle felt like it was mocking me, taking an eternity to reveal a truth I wasn't prepared for. I just wanted to understand the mistake so I could fix it and get on with my life, still blissfully unaware that my life as I knew it was already over. Then, the page loaded. I'm not a financial expert, but you don't need to be one to understand a summary page that lists your total debt in a bold, 6-figure number. For a full minute, I just stared, completely disconnected from what I was seeing. The number was so absurd, so utterly alien, that it didn't register as being attached to me. It felt like I had accidentally logged into someone else's account, perhaps a high-powered executive or a compulsive gambler. But there, at the top of the page, was my name, my date of birth, and my address. It was my report, and it was a catalog of a life I had never lived. I began to scroll down, my hands trembling so much I could barely control the mouse. The first entry was a high-limit credit card opened on my 18th birthday. It was maxed out. The second was another one, from a different national bank, also opened just weeks after I became a legal adult. It was also at its limit. Then came the personal loans, 3 of them, each for tens of thousands of dollars. The dates of origination were scattered over the last 6 years. A silent timeline of financial ruin that had been running parallel to my own quiet, responsible existence. Every single account was in my name. The details were a blur of bank names I didn't recognize and balances that made me feel nauseous. But the addresses for all these accounts were the same. My childhood home, the home where I still lived, where my parents and my younger brother Mark lived. It became sickeningly clear that this wasn't the work of a random identity thief in some other country. The thief was someone who had access to my social security card when I was a teenager, someone who knew my mother's maiden name, someone who could intercept mail before I ever had a chance to see a bill or a late notice. My mind immediately went to my brother. Mark was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. He was charismatic and popular, but he also had an expensive taste that never seemed to align with his part-time jobs. My parents adored him, celebrated his every minor achievement, and never questioned where his money came from. He always had the latest phone, designer clothes, and went on weekend trips with his friends. We were all supposed to be a family of modest means, but Mark's lifestyle told a very different story, a story I had been too naive or too trusting to ever question before this moment. I started to connect the dots, and each connection felt like a physical blow. I remembered the year Mark suddenly had a top-of-the-line gaming computer with 3 monitors. He told everyone he'd saved up for it from his coffee shop job. I now saw a personal loan for $5,000 taken out in my name that same month. I remembered his spontaneous trip to Europe with friends after his first year of college. He had posted pictures of himself in front of famous landmarks, and my parents had proudly showed them to all their friends. A credit card on my report was maxed out on international transactions during that exact period. The evidence was overwhelming. A meticulous ledger of my family's betrayal. They hadn't just stolen money. They had stolen my name, my future, my financial identity. Every boast my parents made about Mark's resourcefulness was a lie funded by my ruin. Every expensive gift he received, every bit of his curated, successful image, was built on a foundation of secret debt they had shackled to me. I wasn't just the responsible, quiet older sibling. I was the unwitting, silent financier of my brother's extravagant life, and I was about to go bankrupt for it. The anger came slowly at first, a low hum beneath the shock and the hurt. It felt like I was drowning in the sheer scale of the deception. For 6 years, my family had been playing a long game, sacrificing my financial well-being for the sake of my brother's comfort and happiness. They had watched me save every penny, work hard at my low-paying jobs, and talk about my modest dreams for the future, all while knowing they were systematically destroying any chance I had of achieving them. They had smiled at me over dinner while my credit score plummeted and collectors were likely sending letters that I never saw. I printed out the entire credit report, all 27 pages of it. The stack of paper felt heavy in my hands, like a physical manifestation of the burden they had placed on me. I knew I had to confront them, but I didn't know how. How do you ask your own mother and father why they would ruin their child's life? How do you face the brother you grew up with and ask him how he could live with himself? I sat in my room for hours just staring at the black and white text, trying to find a version of my family that I could still recognize, and failing completely. I decided to approach them when Mark was out of the house. I found my parents in the living room watching television. The domestic tranquility of the scene felt like a cruel joke. I turned off the TV and placed the stack of papers on the coffee table in front of them without a word. My mother looked at the papers, then at my face, and seemed confused. My father just looked annoyed that I had interrupted their show. The normalcy of their reactions, their complete lack of anticipatory guilt, was perhaps the most painful part of it all. They had no idea their world was about to be shattered as well. My father picked up the first page, his brow furrowed. "What is this?" he asked, his tone impatient. I just said, "It's my credit report. The reason the bank thinks I'm over $100,000 in debt." I watched their faces closely, looking for any flicker of recognition, any sign of guilt. For a moment, there was nothing. They feigned confusion so perfectly that I almost doubted myself. My mother put a hand to her chest and said, "Oh, honey, you've been a victim of identity theft. We have to call the police right away." Her performance was flawless. She feigned motherly concern, her eyes wide with worry. My father joined in, his voice full of manufactured outrage, talking about how criminals were everywhere these days and how we needed to protect ourselves. They were ready to build an entire narrative around a faceless, unknown thief, a convenient scapegoat that would allow them to remain the loving, supportive parents. I felt a surge of cold fury. They weren't just going to lie. They were going to try and make me a partner in their deception, to guide me away from the truth that was sitting right in front of us. I let them talk for a few minutes, listening to them spin their web of lies. It was a well-rehearsed act, and I wondered if they had prepared for this day, for the moment their secret financial life would finally be exposed. I let the silence hang in the air after my father finished his tirade about reporting the crime. Then I pointed to the first credit card statement on the pile. "This was opened on my 18th birthday," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "The documents would have been in this house. The card would have been mailed to this address." "Who opened my mail, Mom?" My mother's face went pale. The performance stopped. The concerned mother evaporated, replaced by a woman who looked trapped. My father's expression hardened. He knew the game was up. He didn't even try to deny it further. He just sighed, a long, weary sound, as if I was the one who was inconveniencing him. "We were going to tell you," he said, a line so weak and pathetic that it was insulting. "We just needed a little help to get Mark started in life. You were always so self-sufficient, so responsible. We knew you would be okay." "Okay?" I repeated the word, my voice barely a whisper. "You've buried me in debt that will take me decades to pay off if I'm ever able to. You've destroyed my chances of getting a house, a car, or even renting a decent apartment. You didn't just get Mark started. You traded my entire future for his comfort." The justification was more painful than the crime itself. They didn't see it as a betrayal. In their twisted view of family, they had simply reallocated resources from the child who had plenty of strength to the one who, in their eyes, needed more help. My mother started to cry then, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity. "You don't understand," she sobbed. Mark had so much pressure on him. His friends all came from wealthy families. We didn't want him to feel left out or deprived. We were just trying to give him the same opportunities as everyone else. The logic was astounding. To prevent their favorite son from feeling inadequate, they had knowingly and systematically crippled their other child, ensuring I would face a future of genuine, legally binding deprivation. The conversation that followed was a masterclass in gaslighting and blame shifting. They told me I was being selfish and dramatic. They claimed they had always intended to pay it all back, as if that was a feasible plan. They pointed to my stable, low-paying job and my simple lifestyle as proof that I didn't need good credit anyway, not like Mark did for his social standing. They were admitting to the crime, while simultaneously framing themselves as the victims of a difficult situation, and me as the ungrateful child who was failing to appreciate their sacrifice. They never once apologized, not a single time. They admitted to opening the accounts, to forging my signature, to hiding the bills for 6 years. But they presented these actions as difficult, parental decisions made out of love for my brother. My role in this family, I finally understood, was not to be a son, but to be a resource. I was a social security number, a clean credit history to be exploited. My responsibility was to be stable so that they could enable my brother's instability. The favoritism wasn't just emotional, it was a deeply embedded financial strategy. I asked them where Mark was in all of this. Was he aware that his entire adult life was a lie funded by my identity? My father had the audacity to tell me that they had protected Mark from the unpleasant details. They didn't want to burden him with the knowledge. So, in their minds, my brother was an innocent party, a princeling who was unaware of the sordid financial dealings that supported his kingdom. They had not only victimized me, but had also infantilized him, ensuring he would never have to face the consequences of his own lifestyle. The confrontation ended with no resolution. They asked me what I was going to do, their voices laced with a new kind of fear. It wasn't the fear of having hurt me, it was the fear of being exposed. They were afraid I would go to the police or tell other family members. Their primary concern was not my ruined future, but the potential damage to their reputation. I walked out of the living room and went back to my bedroom, closing the door on the two strangers who had raised me. The silence in the house was no longer peaceful. It was heavy with the weight of their unforgivable secrets. The next day I packed a bag. I didn't have a lot of money, and with my credit score, I knew I couldn't rent an apartment on my own. I called a friend from work, my voice breaking as I explained a heavily edited version of the situation. He offered me his couch without hesitation, a kindness from a near stranger that felt more genuine than anything my own family had shown me. As I left the house, my mother watched me from the doorway, her face a mixture of fear and resentment. She didn't ask me to stay. She just watched me walk away from the life they had obliterated. Living on a friend's couch, I started the painstaking process of trying to clean up the mess. I spent hours on the phone with fraud departments, my voice flat and emotionless as I repeated the story over and over. Yes, the accounts were opened by a family member. Each time I said it, a fresh wave of shame and betrayal washed over me. Some of the banks were sympathetic but explained that since it was a case of familial fraud, my only real recourse was to file a police report against my parents. Without it, I was still legally responsible for the debt they had accrued. The choice I faced was monstrous. Option 1 was to accept the debt. This would mean declaring bankruptcy before the age of 25, a black mark that would follow me for at least a decade. It would mean a future of financial struggle, constantly looking over my shoulder, my life dictated by the consequences of their actions. It was a life sentence for a crime I didn't commit. Option 2 was to go to the police. It meant pressing charges against my own mother and father, potentially sending them to jail. It meant destroying what was left of my family in the most public way imaginable. I tried to talk to my brother once. I called him and asked him to meet me at a coffee shop. He showed up wearing a jacket that probably cost more than my first month's salary. I laid it all out for him. The loans, the credit cards, the sheer size of the debt that was in my name but had funded his life. I watched his face, hoping to see shock or shame or even a flicker of empathy. Instead, he looked annoyed. He told me I was overreacting and that I was trying to make our parents look bad. He said it was a family matter and that I should handle it quietly. His reaction was the final nail in the coffin of the family I thought I had. He wasn't an innocent, unaware victim. He was a willing participant, or at the very least. A beneficiary who was content to remain willfully ignorant. He didn't offer to help pay it back. He didn't apologize. He just sipped his expensive latte and acted as if I was the one creating a problem. He was so coddled, so protected from all consequences, that he genuinely couldn't comprehend the magnitude of the damage. He saw my ruined future as an inconvenient family drama he wanted no part of. So now I'm here, writing this out on a public forum, because I don't know who else to turn to. My parents have created a situation where I am forced to choose between my own future and their freedom. They used their love for my brother as a weapon against me, and in doing so, they have proven that their love for me was, at best, conditional. They loved my stability, my quiet nature, my refusal to make waves. They loved me for being a perfect victim, one who they assumed would silently absorb the damage and never fight back. Every day I wake up on my friend's couch, and the first thing I think about is the debt. It's a constant crushing weight on my chest. I look at people my age who are getting married, buying houses, or starting their own businesses, and it feels like they are living in a different universe. My future is a black hole, and the people who were supposed to be my biggest protectors are the ones who pushed me in. They stole my 20s from me, and if I do nothing, they will have stolen the rest of my life as well. I have the police report forms, filled out, sitting in an envelope on the corner of the coffee table. All I have to do is sign them and drop them off at the station. Doing so would be an act of self-preservation, the only logical path forward if I ever want to have a normal life. But it would also be an act of ultimate destruction. It would mean making my mother and father into criminals in the eyes of the law. It would mean finalizing the fact that I no longer have a family. It's a choice no child should ever have to make. The question I keep asking myself, and now I'm asking all of you, is what is the right thing to do? Is my loyalty to the idea of family more important than my own right to a future? If I press charges, am I the villain for destroying my family? Or am I just a survivor who is finally fighting back? They made their choice for 6 years, every time they swiped a credit card or signed my name on a loan application. Now I have to make mine, and I am terrified that either path I choose will leave me broken in a different way.